The morning sun cast long shadows across James Harrick's property as he methodically checked the perimeter sensors hidden along his fence line. His weathered hands moved with practiced efficiency, replacing batteries and adjusting the positioning of devices that appeared to be nothing more than ordinary fence posts. Only someone with specialized training would recognize them as sophisticated motion and heat sensors, technology that had once been cutting-edge during the Cold War. At 67, Harrick maintained the lean, wiry build of a man half his age. His silver hair was kept short in a military cut that had become habit rather than necessity, and beneath bushy eyebrows, his gray eyes continuously scanned his surroundings. 25 years after the fall of the Soviet Union, he still couldn't shake the habits formed during decades of counterintelligence operations. The isolated ranch sat 10 miles outside of Tulingua, Texas, a small border town where most residents minded their own business, a quality Harrick deeply appreciated. His nearest neighbor was 5 miles away, providing the buffer zone he preferred. The one-story adobe house with its metal roof blended into the desert landscape, unremarkable except for the subtle security features only a trained eye would notice. "Morning, Colonel," called a familiar voice. Harrick turned to see Miguel, the young man who helped with maintenance around the property. He nodded in acknowledgement. "Any trouble in town?" Miguel shook his head, understanding the real question behind Harrick's words. The colonel never asked idle questions. New faces at Rosa's Cantina. Expensive trucks, city clothes. She says they asked about property in the area. Interesting. Harrick absorbed the information without revealing his thoughts. "Thank you, Miguel." After Miguel left to repair an irrigation line, Harrick walked to the eastern edge of his property. The morning breeze carried the scent of creosote and dust as he looked out over the vast expanse of the Chihuahuan Desert stretching toward the Rio Grande. In the distance, the silhouette of mountains marked the border with Mexico. His life here was deliberately unremarkable. Neighbors knew him as a retired military officer who valued his privacy. The cover story that he'd spent his career in logistics for the Army was believable and boring enough that few asked questions. Only a handful of people knew that Colonel James Harrick had been one of the most effective Soviet hunters in the U.S. intelligence community. Inside his study, photos of a younger Harrick showed him in various locations: Berlin, Prague, Moscow, always partially obscured, standing at the edges of official delegations or conferences. His real work had never been documented, existing only in classified files and in the memories of those he'd worked with and against. He unlocked a hidden panel beneath his desk and removed a leather-bound journal. Inside were handwritten notes in a personal cipher he'd developed decades ago. To anyone else, they would appear to be nothing more than the ramblings of an old man. To Harrick, they were a detailed log of suspicious activities in the region, activities that had been increasing in recent months. The landline phone rang, its harsh tone breaking the silence. Few people had this number. "Harrick," he answered, his voice neutral. "James, it's David." The voice belonged to David Mercer, a former colleague now working in border intelligence coordination. "Can you secure the line?" Harrick pressed a sequence of buttons on the underside of his desk, activating a scrambler that had been modified and updated over the years. "Secure. We lost another agent yesterday, 3 miles from your place. Professional hit, made to look like cartel violence." Harrick felt a familiar tension spreading across his shoulders. "That's the third in 2 months." "Yes, and this one was different. The method reminds me of Riga, 83. A chill ran through Harrick's body that had nothing to do with the room's temperature. Riga, 1983 had been a Soviet operation with a distinctive signature, a calling card of sorts from a particular KGB operative. "That's impossible," Harrick said, his mind already running through possibilities. "Valiev is dead." "We thought so," Mercer replied. "But the evidence suggests otherwise. Or someone trained by him." Harrick's gaze drifted to a photograph on his bookshelf, himself and 3 other men standing before the Brandenburg Gate in 1989, just before the wall came down. One face had been deliberately blurred. Anton Valiev, his Soviet counterpart and nemesis for over 15 years. "Send me what you have," Harrick said finally. "And David, watch your back." After hanging up, Harrick moved to the living room window. The desert landscape looked peaceful, but as trained eye picked out a dust cloud in the distance, a vehicle moving along the rarely used back road. He retrieved a pair of high-powered binoculars from a cabinet and focused on the approaching vehicle. Black SUV. Tinted windows. Moving too slowly to be a local. 20 minutes later, his encrypted tablet chimed with an incoming file from Mercer. The photos confirmed his suspicions. The dead agent bore the hallmarks of a technique Harrick had seen before: precise, efficient, and with a message intended for those who knew how to read it. Harrick's son, Robert, worked for Border Patrol, coordinating intelligence on cartel movements. They hadn't spoken in months, another casualty of Harrick's life of secrets and necessary deceptions. He reached for his phone, then hesitated. Contact would put Robert at risk, especially if what he suspected was true. Instead, he moved to a locked cabinet in his bedroom and opened it with a key he kept on a chain around his neck. Inside lay the tools of a trade he thought he'd left behind: specialized equipment, weapons with untraceable origins, and identification documents for identities long dormant. His fingers brushed against a small metal case. Inside was a Soviet-made lighter, a trophy taken from a KGB safe house in East Berlin. It had been Valiev's. Harrick had kept it as a reminder of how close the game had been. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the desert as Harrick prepared. If Valiev or someone trained by him was operating in the area, it changed everything. The cartels were dangerous, but predictable. Add Soviet-era intelligence tradecraft to their operations, and they became something far more lethal. By evening, Harrick had accessed old networks and called in favors from colleagues who owed him from past operations. Information trickled in. Rumors of a new cartel advisor, an older man with an Eastern European accent. Unusual security protocols at cartel compounds. New tactics being employed against border agents. As night fell, Harrick stood on his porch, watching the stars emerge in the vast Texas sky. In the distance, the lights of a Border Patrol helicopter swept across the landscape. For the first time in years, he felt the familiar ice in his veins, the cold calculation of operational planning. He had been trained to hunt Soviets during an era when the world had clear divisions. The enemy had been defined by ideology and national interests. Now, the lines were blurred by money, power, and criminal enterprise. But the skills remained the same: intelligence gathering, pattern recognition, tradecraft, patience. Morning arrived with the harsh light of the desert sun. Harrick had slept little, his mind occupied with planning. He brewed coffee and spread a topographical map across his kitchen table, marking locations where cartel activity had been reported, overlaid with the positions of the dead agents. The pattern was clear to him: a strategic move to control key transportation corridors while eliminating the most experienced intelligence assets in the region. It was methodical, patient, and reminiscent of KGB operations he'd encountered in the Balkans in the late 1970s. His satellite phone buzzed with an encrypted message from Mercer: Phoenix active. Confirm receipt. Phoenix was a code word from their shared past, an emergency protocol indicating that all official channels were potentially compromised. Harrick typed a confirmation code and sent it, then immediately began disconnecting his electronic devices. If Phoenix was active, it meant someone with access to intelligence networks was working against them. He packed a go bag with essentials and loaded it into his nondescript pickup truck. Before leaving, he activated a series of security protocols for his property, measures designed to alert him to any intrusion and, if necessary, eliminate evidence of his real work. The drive into Terlingua took 30 minutes. The small town was already stirring with morning activity, locals preparing for the day, tourists loading up for excursions into Big Bend National Park. Harrick parked behind Rosa's cantina and entered through the back door. Rosa Diaz had been an informal intelligence source for decades. Her cantina served as neutral ground where information could be exchanged without raising suspicions. She looked up as Harrick entered her office, her eyes narrowing at his expression. "The new men were here again last night," she said without preamble. "The one in charge speaks perfect Spanish, but when he got angry, his accent changed. Eastern European, I think." Harrick nodded. "Did they mention names? Locations?" "They're setting up something big at the old Hansen ranch, the one with the airstrip." She slid a napkin across the desk. On it was written a sequence of numbers. They used a radio. I recognized military coordination codes. "You still have the scanner I gave you." She smiled thinly. "I'm old, Colonel, not obsolete. Be careful, Rosa. These aren't ordinary cartel soldiers." Her eyes hardened. "They killed my nephew last month. Border Patrol found his body in the desert." She opened a drawer and handed him a small package wrapped in cloth. He was carrying this. Harrick unwrapped the package to find a Soviet-made Makarov pistol with a distinctive modification to its grip, a modification he'd seen only once before, on a weapon belonging to Anton Valiev. Where was he found? 3 miles from the Hansen place. Rose's eyes were filled with grief and anger. "Find them, James." He rewrapped the pistol and placed it in his jacket pocket. "I need a secure place for a few days. Somewhere not connected to you." She handed him a key. "My brother's hunting cabin. No one's been there since he died last year." She wrote down directions on another napkin. "What's happening, Colonel? This feels like the old days." "Someone from the old days is here," Harrick replied. "Someone who should be dead." As he left through the back door, Harrick spotted the black SUV he'd seen the previous day, now parked across the street. 2 men sat inside, watching Rose's cantina with professional patience. Their positioning, the way they maintained visual coverage of all approaches, these weren't cartel soldiers. They were trained operatives. He slipped down the alley and circled around to approach his truck from the opposite direction. As he drove out of town, he took a series of random turns to identify any surveillance. The black SUV appeared in his rearview mirror within minutes, maintaining a professional distance. Instead of heading toward the hunting cabin, Harrick drove toward Big Bend National Park, joining the flow of tourist traffic. At a crowded overlook, he parked and exited his vehicle, merging with a group of hikers. From this position, he watched as the SUV pulled into the parking area. 2 men emerged, mid-30s, fit, with the alert posture of trained operatives. They scanned the area methodically. Harrick recognized the technique. It was standard KGB procedure for maintaining surveillance in open areas. Using the tourists as cover, he circled behind a rock formation and approached the SUV from the blind side. Under the vehicle, he quickly attached a magnetic tracker to the frame, an old tool from his field kit, but still effective. He then hiked up a trail, removed a satellite phone from his pack, and made a call to a number few people knew existed. "Authentication Sierra 9 Delta Tango," he said when the line connected. "Authenticated," replied a female voice. "Go ahead. I need everything on the Hansen property near your lingua. Ownership changes, satellite imagery, recent activity. This is outside protocol, Harrick. You're retired. Phoenix is active. Mercer initiated." A pause. "Understood. Time frame: 2 hours. Drop point 3. Harrick ended the call and continued hiking, eventually circling back to the parking area by a different trail. The SUV was gone, but his tracker showed it heading back toward town. By late afternoon, Harrick had retrieved the information package from a prearranged location and was setting up in Rose's brother's hunting cabin, a small, isolated structure in the hills with excellent sight lines and multiple escape routes. The satellite images confirmed his suspicions. The Hansen Ranch showed all the hallmarks of a forward operating base: security perimeters, regular patrol patterns, and communications equipment. Property records revealed that ownership had transferred 6 months earlier to a shell corporation with connections to both Mexican cartels and, more concerning, Russian business interests. Most telling was a thermal image taken 3 nights earlier. Despite the desert heat, one figure on the property registered a cold spot on their chest, the signature of a specialized Soviet-era cooling vest designed to defeat thermal imaging. Harrick had encountered these devices during operations in Afghanistan in the 1980s. As night fell, Harrick prepared his equipment. The hunt that had defined his career had found him again in retirement. This time, the stakes involved not just national security, but the safety of his son and the community he'd come to call home. If Anton Valiev was alive and working with the cartels, he would bring sophisticated counterintelligence methods to their operations, methods that American law enforcement wasn't prepared to counter. But Harrick knew those methods intimately. He had spent decades studying, countering, and defeating them. He laid out his weapons and tools on the cabin's wooden table, a collection that told the story of a lifetime in the shadows. Each had been acquired during different operations, each modified for specific tasks. None could be traced back to him. In the corner of the room, a secure radio picked up encrypted Border Patrol communications. His son Robert's voice occasionally came through, coordinating patrols along the river. The professional tone couldn't mask the stress in his voice. Robert knew something was wrong, even if he didn't know what. Harrick's finger traced a route on the topographical map. Tomorrow, he would begin reconnaissance of the Hansen property. Tonight, he would prepare and plan. The hunter was becoming the hunter again. Outside, the desert wind whispered through the creosote bushes. Somewhere to the south, across an invisible line drawn on maps, forces were gathering. Forces led by a ghost from the Cold War. A ghost that James Harrick had spent a lifetime learning to fight. He closed his eyes, not to sleep, but to remember. Berlin, Prague, Moscow. The faces of agents lost. The tradecraft that had kept him alive. The patient, meticulous approach that had made him legendary among a small circle of operatives on both sides of the Iron Curtain. The game had changed. The players had changed. But the skills remained the same. Tomorrow, Colonel James Harrick would return to the field for one final operation. One final hunt. The first light of dawn streaked across the eastern sky as Harrick positioned himself on a ridge overlooking the Hansen Ranch. Through his high-powered spotting scope, he methodically documented the property's security measures, cameras disguised as weather instruments, motion sensors hidden in rock formations, and patrols that followed Soviet-era patterns, systematic, overlapping, with no blind spots. Definitely Valiev's work, he murmured to himself, noting how the security design mirrored KGB facilities he'd surveilled in Estonia in the 1980s. For 3 hours, Harrick remained motionless, his desert-colored clothing blending into the landscape. He counted 7 men with military bearing distinctly different from typical cartel soldiers. They moved with discipline, maintained proper spacing, and handled their weapons with the ease of professional operators. At precisely 9:17 a.m., a black helicopter appeared from the south, touching down on the ranch's small airstrip. Through a scope, Harrick observed 3 men disembarking. 2 were clearly security, positions established, as constantly scanning. The third was older, slender, with silver hair cut short. Even at this distance, Harrick recognized the measured movements, the way the man surveyed his surroundings before proceeding. Anton Valiev, supposed to be dead for 15 years. Harrick's pulse remained steady as he captured photographs using a specialized long-range lens. The last time he'd seen Valiev had been in Prague, 1990, during the chaotic period after the Berlin Wall fell. Intelligence reports later indicated Valiev had been killed during an internal KGB purge in 1994. Clearly, those reports had been wrong. By mid-afternoon, Harrick had retreated to the hunting cabin, where he downloaded the photographs to a secure laptop. The facial recognition software, modified from an old CIA program, confirmed his visual identification with 89% certainty. Anton Valiev was alive and operating less than 20 miles from Harrick's home. He encrypted the photographs and sent them through a series of proxies to David Mercer, along with a simple message: target confirmed. Phoenix protocols justified. While waiting for a response, Harrick spread the topographical maps across the table again, marking observed patrol routes, sensor locations, and potential approach vectors to the Hansen property. The security was impressive but followed patterns Harrick had studied for decades. Soviet security doctrine emphasized predictability and comprehensive coverage, a strength that could become a weakness if you knew the system intimately. His satellite phone vibrated. Mercer's response was brief: confirmation received. No official resources available. Phoenix remains active. The message confirmed what Harrick had suspected. With security compromised, official channels couldn't be trusted. Whatever Operation Believe was running had penetrated U.S. intelligence networks. Harrick was on his own. As dusk approached, he prepared for a closer reconnaissance of the Hansen Ranch. He dressed in dark clothing with desert camouflage patterns and applied anti-infrared face paint, a precaution against the thermal imaging equipment he'd identified on the property. The drive took 40 minutes, his truck following unpaved ranch roads rarely used even by locals. He parked in a dry creek bed 2 miles from the Hansen property line, concealing the vehicle under a camouflage tarp. The remainder of the approach would be on foot. The desert night was clear and cool, the stars providing enough light for Harrick's trained eyes to navigate the terrain. He moved slowly, methodically, stopping frequently to listen and observe. Each step was placed deliberately to minimize sound and disturbance of the environment. At the property line, he detected the first security measure: seismic sensors embedded in the ground at regular intervals. He noted their positions and carefully navigated between them, using techniques he'd developed during operations behind the Iron Curtain. For the next 4 hours, Harrick worked his way closer to the main compound, creating a detailed mental map of security measures. The operation was surgical, no alarms triggered, no guards alerted. By 2 a.m., he had positioned himself within 100 yards of the main house, concealed in a drainage culvert that provided both cover and a clear line of sight. Inside the house, lights still burned. Through an open window, voices carried on the night air. Harrick activated a directional microphone from his kit and focused it on the window. "Shipment arrives Thursday," a voice was saying in Spanish. "The Border Patrol schedules show minimal coverage at these 3 crossings." Another voice responded in Russian-accented English. "Ensure our people are in position 24 hours in advance. I want redundant surveillance of all approach routes." Valiv's voice, older, rougher, but unmistakable. "The Americans have increased drone surveillance," a third voice added. "Our jamming equipment is effective, but has limited range." "Then we adapt," Valiv replied calmly. "We operated for decades under satellite surveillance far more sophisticated than these border drones. The principles remain the same." Harrick recorded the conversation, focusing particularly on operational details, locations, timing, personnel. The shipment they discussed wasn't drugs, but people. High-value individuals being brought across the border under cartel protection. Just after 3 a.m., the meeting concluded. Lights switched off, and the compound settled into night routine, guards maintaining positions, automated systems running. Harrick began his careful withdrawal, retracing his path through the security perimeter. He was a half-mile from his vehicle when the desert silence was broken by the distant sound of helicopter rotors. Dropping immediately to the ground, Harrick pulled a thermal blanket over his body, a basic countermeasure against airborne infrared sensors. The helicopter approached from the east, its searchlight sweeping across the terrain in a systematic pattern. Not a Border Patrol aircraft, its flight pattern was too precise, too methodical. This was a security sweep, likely triggered by a perimeter alarm he hadn't detected. For 20 minutes, Harrick remained motionless under the blanket as the helicopter circled. Finally, it turned back toward the Hansen Ranch. He waited another 15 minutes before continuing his extraction, moving with increased caution. By dawn, Harrick was back at the hunting cabin, reviewing the recorded conversation and cross-referencing locations mentioned with his maps. The shipment appeared to be scheduled for a crossing point near La Linda, an abandoned border crossing 30 miles east of his position. He placed a secure call to an old contact in Mexican intelligence, General Alejandro Sosa, a man who had worked with Harrick on joint operations in the 1990s. "It's been many years, my friend," Sosa said when the call connected. "I thought you were enjoying retirement." "So did I," Harrick replied. I need information on Russian activity in Coahuila, particularly around Ocampo and Musquis. A pause. This is a delicate topic, James. There have been reports of foreign advisors working with certain organizations. Men with military backgrounds, not the usual mercenaries. Soviet-trained. Some, yes. Former KGB, GRU. They bring different methods, more sophisticated. Several of my agents have been compromised. Professionally handled. No bodies, just disappearances. I have confirmation that Anton Valiev is operating on this side of the border. The silence that followed was telling. Finally, Sosa spoke, his voice lower. That is unexpected news. We believed him eliminated years ago. As did I. He appears to be coordinating some kind of high-value transport operation. Not drugs, people. I have heard rumors, Sosa admitted. Specialists being brought in. People with technical backgrounds, former intelligence officers from Eastern Bloc countries. The cartels are evolving, James. They're building infrastructure that resembles intelligence agencies more than criminal organizations. With Valiev's help, it would explain much. Sosa paused again. I can provide limited intelligence support, but nothing official. My government is complicated on this matter. I understand. Any information on activities near La Linda Crossing would be particularly valuable. I will see what I can do. Be careful, my old friend. Valiev was always your most dangerous adversary. After ending the call, Harrick reviewed his notes again. The operation was taking shape in his mind. Not just drug trafficking, but something more strategic. Valiev was helping the cartels build an intelligence infrastructure, bringing in specialized personnel with backgrounds similar to his own. The implications were disturbing. Criminal organizations with state-level intelligence capabilities could undermine border security, compromise law enforcement, and establish unprecedented control over cross-border operations. By mid-morning, Harrick had established a new observation post on public land that offered a distant view of the main road approaching the Hansen Ranch. From here, he documented vehicles entering and leaving the property, capturing license plates with his long-range camera. A message from Mercer arrived on his secure channel. Border Patrol intelligence reports increased encrypted communications in your area. Russian algorithms identified. Confirmation of your assessment. Harrick sent a brief acknowledgement, then continued his surveillance. Around noon, a convoy of 3 vehicles left the Hansen Ranch, a lead SUV, a large panel truck, and a trailing pickup with armed men. Their destination wasn't clear, but their direction suggested they were heading toward the La Linda Crossing area. He followed at extreme distance, using back roads and his knowledge of the terrain to maintain visual contact without revealing his presence. The convoy eventually arrived at an abandoned warehouse 10 miles from the border, a former agricultural facility with good road access and multiple exit routes. From his position on a distant hillside, Harrick observed as the warehouse was prepared, communications equipment set up, security positions established, supplies unloaded. The operation had the hallmarks of a temporary forward base, designed for a specific mission with limited duration. As evening approached, Harrick returned to the hunting cabin to process the new information. His former adversary was establishing a sophisticated operation, one that leveraged decades of KGB expertise in moving people and materials across hostile borders. The cabin's secure radio picked up increased chatter on Border Patrol frequencies. Something had law enforcement on high alert, though specific details weren't shared over the air. Harrick suspected a security leak had been discovered, possibly related to the Border Patrol scheduling information mentioned in the conversation he'd recorded. His satellite phone chimed with an encrypted message from General Sosa, significant movement detected near Musquis. Former military convoy heading north toward La Linda. ETA Border Region 0400 tomorrow. The timeline was accelerating. Whatever Valiev had planned was happening soon, possibly within the next 24 hours. Harrick needed more information before he could determine his next steps. He decided on a calculated risk, establishing direct surveillance of the warehouse facility. If he could identify who or what was being transported, he'd have a clearer picture of Valiv's ultimate objective. He prepared more thoroughly this time, anticipating more sophisticated security measures around this forward operating base. His equipment included signal jammers to block wireless security systems, thermal countermeasures, and non-metallic infiltration tools that wouldn't trigger magnetic sensors. The approach took over 2 hours, each step measured and precise. The warehouse security was substantial but focused primarily outward, designed to detect approach from law enforcement rather than a single, highly trained operator using counter-surveillance techniques. By 11 p.m., Harrick had positioned himself in the rafters of an adjacent storage shed with a clear line of sight to the warehouse's main entrance. From here, he could observe without being detected, his presence masked by the building's own heat signature and machinery noise. Activity around the warehouse increased around midnight. Additional vehicles arrived, bringing more personnel and equipment. Harrick documented everything through a night vision scope, identifying at least 3 individuals with the bearing and behavior of former Soviet bloc operatives. At 2:17 a.m., Harrick observed Valiv himself arriving at the facility. The sight of his old adversary, older now, but still moving with the same calculating precision, sent a chill through him. Their careers had been intertwined for decades, a chess match across continents during the Cold War. Now, improbably, that match had resumed in the desert borderlands of Texas. For the next hour, Harrick observed a detailed briefing inside the warehouse, visible through windows when personnel moved aside temporary blackout curtains. Though he couldn't hear the conversation, the tactical diagrams and maps visible suggested a complex border crossing operation with multiple contingencies and fallback positions. Just before 4 a.m., radio communications indicated the arrival of the convoy from Mexico. Harrick adjusted his position to observe the south entrance of the warehouse, where preparations were being made to receive incoming vehicles. 3 trucks arrived, accompanied by motorcycles providing security. The vehicles entered the warehouse directly, concealing their contents from potential aerial surveillance. Harrick's patience was rewarded 20 minutes later when personnel began escorting individuals from the trucks into the main warehouse area. Through his scope, he counted 12 people, men and women, all in civilian clothing but with military bearing. They carried no visible luggage, suggesting their personal effects had been transported separately. Each person was escorted individually to a processing area where they appeared to receive documentation and briefing materials. This wasn't a drug shipment or weapons transfer. It was a personnel insertion, bringing trained operatives across the border for deployment within the United States. Harrick documented everything, capturing faces for later identification. As dawn approached, he extracted from his position, leaving behind a miniature transmitter that would alert him when vehicles left the facility. Back at the hunting cabin, Harrick sent the images to Mercer through their secure channel, along with his assessment, confirmed personnel insertion operation. Subjects appeared to be trained operatives, likely former intelligence or military. Request identification through archived Cold War databases. While waiting for a response, he monitored Border Patrol communications. Increased activity suggested they were aware of something unusual, but their patrol patterns indicated they were focusing on traditional crossing points, missing the sophisticated operation happening right under their noses. Mercer's response arrived mid-morning. 3 subjects identified from archives. Former GRU and KGB technical specialists. Biometric matches confirmed. Expertise includes communications infrastructure, surveillance systems, and counterintelligence. The picture became clearer. Valiv wasn't just helping the cartels move drugs or weapons. He was helping them build a sophisticated intelligence apparatus by importing Soviet-trained specialists. The cartel was evolving into something far more dangerous, a non-state actor with intelligence capabilities previously only available to nations. Harrick's transmitter activated shortly after noon, indicating vehicle movement from the warehouse. He quickly positioned himself on a hillside overlooking the most likely route toward Terlingua and nearby towns. Through his scope, he observed a convoy of unremarkable vehicles, domestic sedans and SUVs that wouldn't attract attention. The personnel he'd observed earlier were now dressed as tourists, businesspeople, and workers, their appearances modified to blend seamlessly into border communities. They were being inserted into position, establishing a network that could provide the cartels with unprecedented intelligence capabilities. And Anton Valiv, master of the long game, was orchestrating it all. As the last vehicle passed his position, Harrick caught a glimpse of a passenger in the trailing car, a face he recognized from the previous night's surveillance. The man looked directly toward Harrick's position on the hillside, his expression changing subtly. For an instant, their eyes seemed to meet across the distance. A cold certainty settled in Harrick's stomach. He'd been compromised. He abandoned his position immediately, taking an indirect route back to his vehicle. The hunting cabin was no longer safe. He needed to move, to establish a new base of operations before Valiv's people could locate him. The game had entered a new phase. The hunter had been spotted. Harrick drove through the night, taking a circuitous route that doubled back on itself several times to identify any tail. His years in the field had taught him that once you're compromised, you need to assume that all known locations are burned. The hunting cabin, his home, even his regular haunts in Terlingua, all would be under surveillance now. He eventually stopped at a storage facility outside Marathon, Texas, nearly 70 miles from Terlingua. The unit had been rented under a long-dormant alias, established decades ago, and maintained through automated payments from an obscure trust. Inside was an emergency cache, weapons, communications equipment, cash, and identification documents, all preserved in climate-controlled containers. As dawn broke, Harrick used a secure satellite connection to contact Mercer. My position was compromised, he explained. Valiv's people made me during surveillance. I've relocated to contingency location Delta. Understood, Mercer replied. There's more bad news. Your son's border patrol unit was ambushed last night near La Linda Crossing. 4 agents wounded, 1 critical. Robert's safe, but it was close. Harrick's jaw tightened. Valiv's sending a message. He knows I'm watching, and he's showing me the stakes. That's not all. We've identified 3 of the specialists you photographed entering the country. All former KGB Technical Division, experts in communications infrastructure and surveillance systems. They're building something, James. I know what they're building, Harrick replied. An intelligence network that mirrors what we had in Eastern Europe during the Cold War. Safe houses, surveillance posts, communications intercept capabilities. They're turning the cartels into a state-level intelligence operation. With what objective? Control. Absolute control of cross-border operations, with the ability to identify and neutralize law enforcement efforts before they begin. Harrick paused. I need to speak with Robert. Too risky through official channels. If Valiv has penetrated border patrol communications, I know. But I need information only Robert can provide. I'll handle it. After ending the call, Harrick began methodically preparing for his next move. He cleaned and checked weapons that hadn't been touched in years, tested communications equipment, and reviewed maps of the border region, marking known cartel territories and routing patterns. By mid-morning, he had established a new operational base in an abandoned mining office on the outskirts of Marathon. The location provided good visibility of approaching vehicles while offering multiple escape routes. Using equipment from his cache, he set up basic perimeter security, nothing sophisticated, just enough to give him warning of approach. His first priority was contacting Robert. Direct communication through phones or official channels was too risky. Instead, Harrick drove to Alpine, a small college town 30 miles away, and sought out the public library. From a computer terminal, he sent an email to an account he and Robert had established years ago for emergencies, a simple vacation planning account that would appear innocuous to anyone monitoring communications. The message was equally innocuous. Thinking about that fishing trip we discussed. Meet at the usual spot tomorrow? Dad, the usual spot, was a reference to a hiking trail in Big Bend where they had occasionally met when Robert needed to discuss sensitive Border Patrol matters away from official channels. The timing, tomorrow, was actually a code for 4 hours from now. Leaving the library, Harrick made several anti-surveillance maneuvers through town before heading back toward the national park. He approached the meeting location with extreme caution, arriving an hour early to establish a surveillance position overlooking the trailhead. Robert arrived precisely on schedule, looking outwardly casual in hiking gear, but moving with the alert posture of someone who understood the risk. Harrick observed him for 15 minutes, verifying he wasn't under surveillance before approaching. "You look like hell, Dad," Robert said by way of greeting. "I've been busy." Harrick embraced his son briefly. "Are you all right? I heard about the ambush." Robert's expression darkened. It was professional, not the usual cartel tactics. They knew exactly when and where we'd be, had our frequencies jammed, hit us from multiple positions with disciplined fire. If Rivera hadn't spotted the sniper position, he trailed off, the implications clear. "I need information, Robert. Everything you have on unusual border activity in the last 6 months. Communications anomalies, personnel intrusions, equipment theft. This is official. This is survival." Harrick cut him off. "The people who hit your unit are Soviet-trained intelligence operatives. They've been entering the country through a sophisticated pipeline, establishing an infrastructure that will compromise everything you and your colleagues are trying to accomplish." Robert studied his father's face. "You're operational again," he said finally. "I thought you were done with that life." "So did I." Harrick's voice was grim. "But an old adversary has brought the game to my doorstep." For the next 30 minutes, they walked along the trail while Robert briefed his father on Border Patrol intelligence. The pattern confirmed Harrick's assessment: a systematic infiltration of specialized personnel, targeted compromising of security systems, and the beginnings of a sophisticated intelligence-gathering network. "We've had unusual equipment failures," Robert explained. "Communications dead zones where there shouldn't be any, drones that lose connection or return with corrupted data. And there have been breaches of our secure databases, patrol schedules, agent identifications, safe house locations. They're mapping your capabilities," Harrick said. "Standard Soviet procedure: understand your adversary's systems before neutralizing them." "This is bigger than just Border Patrol, isn't it?" Robert asked. "Much bigger. They're establishing an infrastructure that could compromise law enforcement, intelligence operations, and military activities across the entire border region." Harrick paused, considering how much to reveal. "The man running this operation is someone I hunted during the Cold War. Anton Valiv, former KGB borderlands specialist." Robert's eyes widened slightly. "You never told me about him." "Some adversaries define your career. Valiv was mine." Harrick's expression was distant, remembering. "We played a chess match across Eastern Europe for nearly 2 decades. Every move I made, he countered. Every operation I ran, he seemed to anticipate." "What happened to him?" "Supposedly died during the post-Soviet reorganization." Apparently, that information was incorrect. Harrick's focus returned to the present. "I need you to do something, and it will violate every protocol you're bound by." Robert tensed. "Dad, I need the raw data from the Border Patrol sensor network for the region between Presidio and Del Rio. Unfiltered and uninterpreted. That's highly classified. I could lose my job, face prosecution. You could lose your life," Harrick interrupted sharply. "Valiv doesn't leave loose ends, and your unit has seen too much already." The ambush was just the beginning. They walked in silence for several minutes, the only sound the crunch of gravel beneath their boots and the distant call of desert birds. "I'll need 48 hours, Robert said finally. "And I'll need to know this information is being used to protect my people. You have my word." Harrick placed a hand on his son's shoulder. "When this is done, Valiv and his network will be neutralized. But until then, trust no one in your organization. Assume all communications are compromised. All locations are surveilled." "How do I contact you?" Harrick handed him a satellite phone. "This unit only. Memorize the number, then destroy any record of it. And Robert, watch your back. These people are professionals. After parting ways with his son, Harrick took an extremely circuitous route back to his new base in Marathon, employing every counter-surveillance technique in his considerable arsenal. By evening, he was confident he hadn't been followed. As night fell across the desert, Harrick's mind returned to his history with Valiv. Their last encounter had been in Prague, 1990, during the chaotic period when the Soviet Empire was disintegrating. Despite being adversaries, they developed a grudging professional respect over the years, each recognizing in the other a worthy opponent. Berlin, 1983. The memory surfaced with perfect clarity. The safe house in Kreuzberg had been compromised, 3 agents already captured by East German security forces. Harrick, then operating under diplomatic cover at the U.S. Embassy, had 20 minutes to extract the remaining agent before Stasi teams sealed all exit routes from the sector. The extraction plan was proceeding when he spotted the surveillance team on the adjacent rooftop. Not the expected East Germans, but a different unit altogether. Something in their positioning, their discipline, told him immediately, KGB, not Stasi. He adjusted the route, taking his agent through a series of pre-war basement tunnels connecting adjacent buildings. They emerged 2 blocks from the planned exit point, seemingly clear of surveillance, when Harrick spotted him, a slender man in a gray coat, reading a newspaper at a cafe. Their eyes met briefly across the street. No recognition showed on the man's face, but Harrick knew instantly. This man had anticipated his route change, positioning himself at the secondary exit point. Only someone who thought like Harrick himself would have predicted that decision. They made it out that night, but barely. 3 more operations over the next month were similarly compromised, always with the same hallmarks. A report eventually crossed Harrick's desk identifying the KGB officer responsible for counterintelligence in the Berlin sector, Major Anton Valiv. Thus began their decade-long shadow war across Eastern Europe. The satellite phone pulled Harrick back to the present. A text message from Mercer. Unusual communications detected at Hansen Ranch. High-volume data transmission to unknown receivers across border region. Encryption matches Soviet-era diplomatic protocols. It was beginning. The network was being activated. For the next 36 hours, Harrick maintained surveillance on known cartel locations across the region, documenting unusual activity and communications patterns. The specialist teams he'd observed entering the country were establishing themselves in key locations, near border crossings, along transportation corridors, and in proximity to law enforcement facilities. Robert's data arrived via dead drop, a comprehensive download of the Border Patrol's sensor network across 200 miles of border. Harrick spent hours analyzing the raw information, identifying patterns invisible to standard analysis. What emerged was alarming. A systematic mapping of surveillance blind spots, patrol timing, and response protocols. More concerning were the gaps in the data, periods where sensors mysteriously malfunctioned or reported obviously false information. The network was already being compromised, its reliability undermined in ways that would be nearly impossible to detect without the kind of analysis Harrick was performing. By the 3rd day, Harrick had assembled a comprehensive picture of Valiv's operation. The former KGB officer was establishing what intelligence professionals called a ghost infrastructure, a parallel network of surveillance, communications, and control capabilities that existed alongside legitimate systems, invisible except to those who knew exactly what to look for. Through this infrastructure, cartel operations could move seamlessly across the border, avoiding law enforcement and military interdiction. More dangerously, it gave Valiv's people access to sensitive information about U.S. security operations, creating vulnerabilities that could be exploited for years to come. Harrick was completing his analysis when the satellite phone rang. Robert, calling from an unknown location. "They hit us again," his son said without preamble, his voice tight with tension. "Coordinated attacks on 3 border patrol stations simultaneously. Communications were jammed. Backup couldn't be called. We have casualties, Dad. Where are you now? Secure location with the survivors from my unit. Someone leaked our fallback positions. The standard safe houses weren't safe. Stay there. Trust no communications from your command unless verified in person. There's more, Robert continued. Before communications went down, we received reports of multiple border incursions, well-coordinated groups crossing at previously unmapped points. Not the usual pattern at all. They're bringing in their operational teams, Harrick said grimly. The technical infrastructure is established, now they're moving in the personnel to exploit it. We need help. Official channels, federal response, would be compromised before they arrived, Harrick interrupted. Believes people have penetrated your systems too deeply. Any official response would be anticipated and countered. Then what's the alternative? We can't just allow. I'll handle it, Harrick said, his voice taking on the cold precision that had once made him legendary in intelligence circles. But I need you to keep your people secure and off official channels until you hear from me. After ending the call, Harrick returned to his maps. The situation was deteriorating faster than anticipated. Valiv was accelerating his timeline, moving from infrastructure establishment to active operations. The attacks on border patrol stations weren't just about eliminating opposition. They were about creating chaos and confusion while the main operation proceeded. Harrick needed to strike at the center of the network, disrupt Valiv's command and control capabilities. And to do that, he needed to return to the Hansen Ranch. This time, his approach would be different. Not surveillance, but infiltration. Not observation, but action. He spent the remainder of the day preparing, selecting weapons and equipment with methodical precision. Each item was chosen based on decades of operational experience. Nothing extraneous, nothing that could fail at a critical moment. By evening, his plan was set. The approach to the Hansen Ranch began at midnight. A slow, cautious advance through terrain Harrick had already mapped in detail. He moved differently now, not as a surveillant, but as an operator, each movement economical and purpose-driven. The ranch's security remained formidable, but Harrick had identified its patterns and weaknesses during his previous observations. He exploited a 3-minute gap in the patrol schedule, using specialized equipment to defeat the electronic perimeter without triggering alarms. By 2 a.m., he had penetrated to the main communications center, a retrofitted barn housing sophisticated equipment. From a concealed position, he observed 4 technicians operating what appeared to be a command post, coordinating activities across multiple locations using encrypted channels. Harrick waited patiently, gathering intelligence on communications protocols and operational patterns. Just after 3 a.m., the technicians received a transmission that caused immediate activity. Maps were consulted, communications intensified. Something significant was underway. Through his directional microphone, Harrick caught fragments of conversation, references to a major shipment, specialized personnel, and a timetable that appeared to be accelerating. The operation Valiv had been building toward was reaching its culmination. At 3:47 a.m., a vehicle approached the communications center. Anton Valiv emerged, moving with the purposeful stride Harrick remembered from their Cold War encounters. Seeing his old adversary in person triggered a flood of memories: Prague, Berlin, Budapest. Dozens of operations where they had matched wits, each seeking to outmaneuver the other. Valiv entered the communications center, and through the window, Harrick watched as he took command of the operation, issuing directives with the same calm authority he'd demonstrated decades earlier behind the Iron Curtain. For 15 minutes, Harrick observed and recorded, gathering critical intelligence on Valiv's plans. The operation was indeed massive, a coordinated insertion of specialized personnel and equipment across multiple border points, timed to coincide with the disruption of border patrol and law enforcement capabilities. What Harrick heard next confirmed his worst fears. Valiv was discussing the liquidation of compromised assets, including Robert's border patrol unit. The survivors who had witnessed the sophisticated nature of the attacks were now liabilities to be eliminated. The rules of engagement changed instantly in Harrick's mind. This was no longer just about intelligence gathering. His son's life was at stake. Moving with cold efficiency, Harrick prepared to disable the communications center. From his equipment pack, he retrieved specialized devices designed to disrupt electronic systems without detectable traces, technology developed during his active service years and modified with components from his personal collection. The first device was positioned near the facility's power distribution panel, a controlled EMP generator that would disable electronic systems without permanent damage. The second, placed near the communications array, would corrupt data transmission protocols, rendering the network temporarily useless. Harrick was placing the final device when a perimeter alarm sounded, not triggered by him, but by another intrusion on the property's eastern boundary. Security personnel mobilized immediately, creating a momentary distraction. Through his scope, Harrick observed the cause of the alarm: a Border Patrol helicopter conducting an unscheduled overflight of the property. Someone in law enforcement had connected enough dots to investigate the Hansen Ranch directly. The timing couldn't have been worse. Valiv's security team was now on high alert, their attention focused outward on the helicopter. Inside the communications center, activity intensified as they prepared contingency protocols. Harrick faced a critical decision. His infiltration remained undetected, but the window for clean action was closing rapidly. If he activated the disruptive devices now, the effect would be associated with the helicopter's appearance, potentially compromising Border Patrol operations further. He chose to wait, maintaining his position as the helicopter completed its pass and moved off to the west. As the security team began to stand down from high alert, Harrick noted a subtle shift in their positioning, a tightening of the perimeter, changes in patrol routes. Someone was implementing textbook counterinfiltration measures. Valiv had sensed his presence. This realization was confirmed moments later when additional security personnel emerged from the main house, establishing expanded defensive positions with overlapping fields of fire. The random patrol patterns were replaced with a coordinated search grid, classic Soviet doctrine for flushing out infiltrators. Harrick had seconds to decide. Activating the devices would achieve his objective of disrupting communications but would guarantee detection. Withdrawing would preserve his cover but leave Valiv's operation intact and leave Robert's unit vulnerable to the planned liquidation. He thought of his son, of the decades spent playing the long game against adversaries like Valiv. Sometimes, survival required sacrifice. Harrick activated the devices. The effect was immediate and comprehensive. The communications center went dark, backup generators failed to engage, and the sophisticated electronics within emitted the distinctive odor of overloaded circuits. Through his scope, Harrick observed Valiv's reaction, not panic, but the cold calculation of a professional assessing damage and adapting. Security teams responded to the new threat, their search patterns shifting toward the communications center. Harrick began his extraction, moving through pre-planned routes designed to exploit blind spots in their coverage. He was 200 yards from the perimeter when searchlights illuminated the area around him. A voice called out commands in Russian, not to him, but to the security teams establishing blocking positions. They hadn't spotted him yet, but they were closing the net methodically. Harrick activated his final contingency, a series of small diversionary devices placed during his approach, designed to create confusion rather than damage. They detonated in sequence, drawing attention and resources to the western perimeter, away from his actual position. The diversion worked momentarily, creating a seam in the security cordon. Harrick exploited it immediately, moving with controlled urgency toward the extraction point where his vehicle was concealed. He was within 50 yards of the perimeter when a single shot rang out, the bullet impacting the ground 3 feet to his right. A warning shot, expertly placed. A voice called from behind him, speaking English with a familiar Russian accent. "Your technique remains impressive, Colonel Harrick. Few would have penetrated this far." Anton Valiv stood 30 yards away, a pistol held casually at his side. Behind him, security personnel were establishing positions, weapons trained on Harrick's location. "You've been officially dead for 15 years, Anton," Harrick replied, slowly turning to face his old adversary. "Retirement didn't suit you?" Valiv's thin smile was visible even in the dim light. "As it evidently didn't suit you. I recognized your work immediately, the surveillance patterns, the infiltration technique. Always methodical, always patient. Time hasn't changed that. Some games never really end." "Indeed." Valiv gestured toward the disabled communications center. "An impressive operation. Temporary disruption only, of course, but elegantly executed. The Cold War incarnated in the desert." Security personnel had now established a complete cordon. Escape routes were sealed, weapons ready. Harrick assessed his options, limited and deteriorating by the second. "Your son's unit complicates matters," Valiv continued conversationally. "Witnesses to our methods create operational vulnerabilities. Surely you understand this professional necessity." "I understand that threatening my son was your final mistake," Harrick replied, his voice carrying the cold certainty that had once made him legend in the intelligence community. Valiv studied him for a moment. "We are professionals, you and I. Relics of another era, perhaps, but bound by its rules. Your situation appears terminal, Colonel. I offer professional courtesy, surrender now, and your end will be dignified." Harrick's mind calculated angles, distances, response times. The odds were overwhelming, the situation nearly impossible. "Nearly. You're right about one thing, Anton," he said finally. "We are bound by the rules of another era." With explosive suddenness, Harrick activated his final contingency, a device that sent a brief, powerful electromagnetic pulse through the immediate area. Tactical radios failed, night vision equipment went dark, and electronic weapons sights malfunctioned simultaneously. In the momentary confusion, Harrick moved not toward escape, but directly toward Valiv. The years seemed to fall away as training took over, his body remembering combat techniques honed during decades of operations behind enemy lines. The security team recovered quickly, but their fire control was disrupted by Valiv's proximity to their target. This critical hesitation gave Harrick the seconds he needed to close the distance. The two old adversaries engaged in hand-to-hand combat, each movement efficient and purposeful. There was nothing wasted, nothing dramatic, just the lethal precision of extensively trained operatives. Valiv's technique remained impressive despite his age, combining Soviet military hand-to-hand with adaptations developed over decades of field operations. For 30 seconds, they matched each other move for move, counterattack for counterattack. Then Harrick executed a technique Valiv couldn't have anticipated, a control method developed by U.S. Special Operations after the Russians' supposed death. The technique caught Valiv by surprise, a momentary advantage Harrick exploited ruthlessly. In the space of 3 seconds, he disabled his opponent with a precision strike to the brachial nerve cluster, temporarily paralyzing Valiv's right arm. In the same fluid movement, he relieved the Russian of his sidearm and positioned himself with Valiv as a shield against the security team. "Stand down," Harrick commanded in flawless Russian, his voice carrying the unmistakable authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed in crisis situations. "Weapons down or he dies immediately." The security personnel hesitated, their training conflicting with the unexpected scenario. Valiv, recovering his composure despite the pain, gave a slight nod. Reluctantly, they lowered their weapons. "You've improved since Prague," Valiv commented, his tone almost conversational despite the circumstances. "That technique wasn't in your repertoire before." "I've had time to expand my skill set," Harrick replied, already calculating his next move. The standoff was temporary. Security teams would be regrouping, establishing sniper positions, preparing to recapture control of the situation. He needed to act quickly. "Your extraction vehicle is already compromised," Valiv said, reading Harrick's intentions. "The perimeter is sealed. Even with me as your shield, you won't make it 200 meters." "I don't need to." Harrick tightened his grip slightly. I just need you to call off the hit on my son's unit. A thin smile crossed Valiv's face. Not an intelligence operation after all. A personal matter. Call it professional courtesy between old adversaries. And if I refuse? Harrick's voice became colder. Then we end our game here, definitively. One of us doesn't walk away. Given your current position, the probabilities don't favor you. For several seconds, Valiv was silent, calculating options just as Harrick was doing. Finally, he gave a slight nod. Very well. A temporary accommodation can be arranged. Your son's unit becomes a non-priority. Not good enough. They're removed completely from your target list. Permanently. You're not in a position to dictate terms, Colonel. The tactical situation will shift against you in approximately 90 seconds when my secondary response team arrives. Then we have 89 seconds to reach an understanding. Harrick adjusted his position slightly, maintaining control while scanning for immediate threats. One border patrol unit is insignificant in your larger operation. A reasonable concession. Valiv considered this. Perhaps. But concessions require reciprocity. What do you offer in return? Your life. Today. A temporary reprieve at best. You'll continue hunting me. As you would continue hunting me, Harrick countered. The game resumes, but my son's unit remains off limits. Something shifted in Valiv's expression, a professional reassessment. You infiltrated a secure compound single-handed, disabled our communications hub, and now hold position against superior forces. Your skills remain, impressive for a man supposedly in retirement, as do yours for a man supposedly dead. A faint smile. The terms are acceptable. Your son's unit will be removed from all targeting protocols. Your word on this? My professional assurance. Between operators of our experience, it should suffice. Harrick made his decision. Relay the order. Now, with me listening. Valiv gave instructions to his security chief in Russian, explicit and unambiguous. The Border Patrol unit was to be removed from all targeting lists, effective immediately. Harrick, fluent in the language, confirmed the accuracy of the order. Now comes the interesting part, Valiv said after completing the transmission. Your extraction under current circumstances appears problematic. I've faced worse odds. No doubt. But perhaps an alternative exists. One that honors the professional respect between us while satisfying operational requirements. I'm listening. A 30-second head start. My men will fire, but with deliberate inaccuracy. You will appear to escape under fire, preserving my authority while allowing you to withdraw intact. Harrick weighed the offer. It was tactically sound, if Valiv kept his word. And despite everything, the Russian had always been a professional who understood the unwritten rules that governed their shadow world. Accepted. But understand this. If your operation endangers my son again, our next encounter ends only one way. Understood. Valiv's voice carried the weight of professional acknowledgement. 30 seconds begin when you release me. I suggest you make them count. Harrick calculated trajectories, cover positions, and the most efficient extraction route. Then, with practiced efficiency, he struck Valiv precisely at the base of the skull, not enough to cause permanent damage, but sufficient to disorient him momentarily. As the Russian staggered, Harrick was already moving, exploiting the momentary confusion among the security team. True to Valiv's word, gunfire erupted but struck around Harrick's position rather than at him directly. He moved with controlled urgency, utilizing the terrain features he'd memorized during infiltration. Within 20 seconds, he had reached the perimeter. Within 30, he had breached it. The pursuit that followed felt almost choreographed, aggressive enough to appear genuine, but never quite closing the distance. By the time Harrick reached his concealed vehicle, the security forces had fallen back to defensive positions around the compound. He departed without further incident, taking an indirect route back toward Marathon. Once safely away, he contacted Robert on the secure satellite phone. The immediate threat to your unit has been neutralized. Maintain security protocols, but the specific targeting has been called off. How can you be sure? Robert asked, the strain evident in his voice. I reached an understanding with the opposing commander. Harrick paused. It won't stop their overall operation, but your people aren't specifically targeted anymore. That's not a standard border patrol negotiation technique. No, it's not. Harrick checked his rearview mirror out of habit, confirming no pursuit. Where are you now? Secure location outside Presidio. We've got wounded here, Dad. Medical attention has been minimal. We can't risk established facilities. I'll arrange something through old channels. Hold position and maintain communications blackout except for this line. After ending the call, Harrick contacted Mercer, providing a brief, clinical assessment of the night's events. Communications hub at Hanson Ranch temporarily disabled. Secured agreement to remove Robert's unit from targeting. Need medical support for wounded agents at these coordinates. Mercer's response was immediate. Medical team can be arranged through unofficial channels. ETA 4 hours. Regarding the Hanson Ranch, satellite imagery shows significant activity post-infiltration. They're relocating, James. Entire operation moving to contingency locations. Expected. Believe always maintain backup positions. Standard Soviet procedure. This complicates tracking substantially. Not necessarily. Harrick's mind was already mapping possibilities. The communication disruption creates a 48-hour vulnerability. Their network will be operating on secondary protocols, less secure, more predictable. We have a window to identify and map the contingency infrastructure. And then we target it systematically. Over the next 24 hours, Harrick established a new operational base in an abandoned hunting lodge 30 miles west of Marathon. From this location, using equipment retrieved from his emergency cache, he began monitoring communications across the region, focusing on frequencies and encryption patterns typical of Soviet-era contingency protocols. By midday, patterns emerged. Valiv's operation was indeed relocating, but the move wasn't chaotic. It was executing a pre-planned contingency, shifting to secondary facilities with practiced efficiency. Monitoring these communications allowed Harrick to begin mapping the backup infrastructure. Robert called in the afternoon, confirming the medical team had arrived and was treating the wounded agents. They're good. Military trained, no questions asked. Where did you find them? Some debts never expire, Harrick replied. What's the status of official response to the attacks? Confused and compromised. Command is treating it as escalated cartel violence, missing the pattern entirely. Our intelligence channels are partially disabled. Someone corrupted key databases, inserted false information. Valiv's work. He's isolating your unit, discrediting your intelligence to prevent effective response. It's working, Robert admitted. Our reports are being questioned. Our assessments dismissed as exaggerated. That's why we operate outside official channels for now. I'm tracking their contingency network. When I have the complete picture, we'll act. We? Dad, this isn't a border patrol operation anymore. Whatever you're planning will neutralize a hostile intelligence network operating on American soil, Harrick finished firmly. This is what I was trained for, Robert. What I spent decades doing. After ending the call, Harrick continued his analysis of intercept data. By evening, he had identified 3 contingency locations, a ranch south of Marfa, an abandoned copper processing facility near Sierra Blanca, and a remote hunting property west of Fort Stockton. Each facility showed communication and transportation patterns consistent with Valiv's operation, but distributed to reduce vulnerability. The decentralization complicated targeting, but also created opportunities. Dividing the operation meant dividing security resources, potentially creating exploitable weaknesses. Harrick was plotting approach vectors to the Marfa location when his satellite phone buzzed with an encrypted message from Mercer. Critical intelligence. 3 Hungarian nationals with GRU backgrounds entered U.S. through Tijuana yesterday. Transportation traced to your region. Arriving within 24 hours. The message confirmed Harrick's assessment. Valiv was bringing in specialized reinforcements to compensate for the disruption. The timeline was accelerating. Throughout the night, Harrick continued monitoring communications, building a comprehensive picture of the contingency operation. By dawn, he had identified command structures, security protocols, and most crucially, the communication architecture linking the dispersed facilities. The system structure revealed Valiv's ultimate objective. The network wasn't just supporting cartel operations. It was establishing a permanent intelligence infrastructure along the border, capable of monitoring and compromising U.S. law enforcement and military activities indefinitely. If completed, it would provide unprecedented control over cross-border operations for years to come. As the sun rose over the desert landscape, Harrick began planning his response. Not just disruption this time, but systematic dismantling of the entire network. The operation would require precision targeting of multiple locations within a narrow time frame. Neutralizing the infrastructure before Valiv could implement additional contingencies. He couldn't accomplish it alone. At 0700, he contacted Robert on the secure line. "I need your technical assessment of current Border Patrol communications vulnerabilities." Robert provided a detailed analysis, compromised frequencies, corrupted databases, surveillance blind spots. The picture was comprehensive and disturbing. Valiv's people had penetrated deeply into law enforcement systems, creating an operational environment where effective response was nearly impossible. "Can you assemble a team?" Harrick asked. "People you trust, absolutely. Communications specialists, tactical operators. No more than 6, all operating completely off official channels." "That's beyond unauthorized, Dad." "That's necessary," Harrick interrupted. "Official response is compromised. The only effective action will come from a team operating outside those constraints." Silence stretched for several seconds before Robert responded. "I know 4 people. Absolutely trustworthy, highly skilled. Veterans who understand what we're facing. Bring them to these coordinates." Harrick provided the location of a secondary safe house he'd established. 2,000 hours tonight. Full communications blackout during transit. The remainder of the day was devoted to preparation, organizing equipment, developing operational plans, establishing secure communications protocols for the mission. Harrick worked with methodical precision, drawing on decades of experience in conducting exactly this type of operation against Soviet infrastructure during the Cold War. By evening, he had established a complete operational template, 3 teams targeting the contingency locations simultaneously, focusing on communications infrastructure, security systems, and command personnel. The objective wasn't destruction but strategic disable of key components, creating cascading failures across the entire network. Robert arrived at the safe house precisely at 2,000 hours, accompanied by 4 individuals with the unmistakable bearing of experienced operators. Introductions were minimal, professional: 2 former special forces, 1 signals intelligence specialist, 1 former DA undercover operator specialized in cartel infrastructure. "We understand the situation," the signals specialist said after Harrick outlined the threat assessment. "Unofficial operation, no official support or recognition, potentially career-ending for all of us if exposed. Potentially life-ending if we don't act," Robert added. "These aren't ordinary cartel operations. They've demonstrated capabilities that threaten every aspect of border security." Harrick laid out the operational plan with precision, detailing approach vectors, timing, and objectives for each team. "We're not conducting a traditional assault. This is a precise targeting operation against key infrastructure components. Identify, disabled, withdraw. Minimal engagement with security personnel if possible." "And if not possible," one of the Special Forces operators asked, "then you do what's necessary to complete the mission and extract safely," Harrick replied coldly. "These people have killed federal agents, compromised national security systems, and established a hostile intelligence network on American soil. The objective is dismantling that network by any means required." The operational briefing continued for 2 hours, covering contingencies, communications protocols, and intelligence on security measures at each target location. Throughout, Harrick noted the growing respect in the operator's expressions as they recognized the comprehensive nature of his planning and his intimate knowledge of the adversary's methods. "You've done this before," the DEA specialist observed during a brief break. "This exact type of operation." "Many times," Harrick acknowledged. "Against the same people, operating under different flags." By midnight, the plan was finalized. 3 teams would deploy simultaneously to the contingency locations, with Harrick leading the assault on the primary facility near Marfa, the location showing the highest level of command communications and most likely to house senior leadership, possibly including Valiv himself. Equipment was distributed from Harrick's cache, specialized tools for defeating security systems, communications devices operating on frequencies outside normal monitoring ranges, weapons selected for reliability and operational appropriateness. Nothing could be traced to official agencies, nothing that would compromise the operators if the mission failed. "We deploy at 0200, Harrick concluded. "Communications check at 0230, simultaneous execution at 0300. Questions? There were none. These were professionals who understood the stakes and recognized the necessity of operating outside official channels against a threat that had already penetrated those channels. As the teams made final preparations, Robert approached Harrick privately. "This isn't just about border security for you, is it? It's personal." Harrick checked the action on a suppressed handgun before securing it in a tactical holster. "Valiv and I have history. Deep history. Are you compromised by that history?" The question would have angered Harrick from anyone else. From his son, he recognized it as legitimate operational concern. "No. The history provides tactical advantage. I understand his methods, his contingency planning, his weaknesses. That's why this plan will succeed where an official operation would fail." Robert studied his father's face for a moment, then nodded. "I've never seen this side of you before." "Not completely. It's been dormant, not gone." Harrick secured additional magazines in his tactical vest. "Some skills never leave you, no matter how long they're in use." At 0200, the teams departed in separate vehicles, taking indirect routes to their target locations. Harrick, accompanied by Robert and the signal specialist, drove toward the Marfa facility, a ranch property showing the highest concentration of command communications over the past 24 hours. The approach was conducted with professional discipline, the vehicle following back roads to avoid potential surveillance, maintaining communications blackout except for essential operational traffic. They established an observation position 2 miles from the target at 0245, conducting final reconnaissance before execution. The ranch showed typical security measures for a Cartel-controlled property, but with sophisticated enhancements Harrick recognized from Soviet installations, overlapping surveillance sectors, counter-approach sensors, redundant power systems. All expected, all accounted for in the operational plan. At precisely 0300, simultaneous communications from the other teams confirmed they were in position and prepared to execute. Harrick gave the final authorization: execute Phase 1. Maintain discipline. Focus on primary objectives. Good hunting. The operation began with precision electronic warfare, targeted jamming of security systems, corruption of surveillance feeds, disruption of internal communications. These measures, implemented by the signal specialist, created a 10-minute window for infiltration before backup systems could be activated. Harrick led the approach, moving across the open terrain with the efficiency of someone who had conducted hundreds of similar operations. Despite his age, his movements remained fluid and purposeful, muscle memory taking over where physical prime had faded. They penetrated the outer security perimeter at 0307, using specialized equipment to defeat electronic sensors without triggering alerts. The first human security was encountered at 0312, 2 guards maintaining a checkpoint near the main communications array. Harrick neutralized them with non-lethal techniques, leaving them unconscious but alive, secured with restraints. Primary communications hub identified, the signals specialist reported at 0315, indicating a converted barn structure similar to the one at the Hansen Ranch. Heat signatures indicate 4 personnel inside, active systems operational. Harrick nodded, directing Robert to establish security positions covering their withdrawal route. Then, with practiced efficiency, he led the approach to the communications hub, utilizing dead ground and structural features for concealment. Entry was executed at 0318, a synchronized breach using specialized tools to defeat the electronic lock systems. Inside, they encountered 4 technicians operating a sophisticated command center with multiple workstations, communications arrays, and surveillance monitors. The technicians offered no resistance, surrendering immediately when confronted with armed operators. "Secure them," Harrick ordered, already moving toward the primary server arrays. Standard protocols: bound, gagged, positioned for maximum recovery time. While Robert secured the prisoners, Harrick and the signals specialist began the primary mission: systematic identification and disabled of key network components. They worked with practiced efficiency, the specialist identifying critical systems while Harrick disabled them using techniques designed to prevent immediate repair or reactivation. Command communications disabled, the specialist reported at 0325. Security systems isolated from central control. Surveillance network corrupted. Primary objectives achieved. Harrick nodded, continuing his methodical disabled of backup systems and redundant communications arrays. Status from Teams 2 and 3? Team 2 reports successful execution, primary objectives achieved, extracting now. Team 3. The specialist frowned. No communication from Team 3 since 0318. The Sierra Blanca location, Harrick noted, concern evident in his voice. Continue monitoring. We complete our objectives regardless. As they worked, external security reactions became evident. Increased movement outside the building, radio traffic indicating heightened alert status. The 10-minute window was closing rapidly. "We need to move," Robert warned from his security position. Vehicle approaching from the east, multiple personnel. Harrick completed the final disabled sequence, ensuring the communications infrastructure was comprehensively neutralized. Extraction Route 1. Move now. Maintain disciplined intervals. They exited the building at 0332, immediately encountering increased security presence. 2 guards approaching from the north spotted them and raised weapons. Robert responded first, his marksmanship reflecting both training and experience. Both guards went down with non-lethal wounds, disabled but alive. Vehicle blocking primary extraction route, the signals specialist reported urgently. For personnel deploying tactical positions. Harrick adjusted instantly. Alternate Route 3. Move. They shifted direction, utilizing pre-planned contingency routes to avoid direct confrontation with security forces. The extraction became more complex, requiring tactical movement through increasingly alert security zones. Twice they were forced to engage hostile forces directly, Harrick and Robert operating with synchronized efficiency to neutralize threats while maintaining momentum toward extraction. At 0341, they reached the vehicle rendezvous point, finding their transportation secured and intact. The extraction began immediately, following predetermined routes designed to avoid obvious pursuit patterns. By 0400, they had reached the first safe distance marker. No signs of effective pursuit evident. Team 2 confirms successful extraction, all personnel intact, the signals specialist reported. Still no communication from Team 3. Harrick's expression tightened. Maintain operational security. We proceed to primary rally point, then assess Team 3 situation. The drive to the rally point took 45 minutes. Following an indirect route to identify potential surveillance or pursuit. None materialized, suggesting their operational security remained intact. At the rally point, an abandoned gas station 30 miles outside Marathon, Team 2 is already waiting, their mission accomplished with similar efficiency. The operations leader, a former Delta operator, provided a concise debrief. Complete disabled of communications and surveillance infrastructure at the Fort Stockton location. Minimal resistance encountered. For hostile personnel neutralized, non-lethal, secured on site. All operational objectives achieved within parameters. Excellent work, Harrick acknowledged. Any communication from Team 3? Negative. Complete signals blackout since approximately 0320. The implications were concerning. The Sierra Blanca location had shown the lowest level of communications activity during reconnaissance, suggesting a less critical facility with potentially lower security. Team 3's silence indicated something unexpected had been encountered. Harrick made his decision. Teams 1 and 2 proceed to secondary fallback position. Maintain full security protocols. Prepare for potential contingency operations. I'll take a 2-person element to investigate Team 3's situation. I'm going with you, Robert said immediately. Negative. You coordinate the fallback position. Operational security is priority now. Robert started to protest, then recognized the shift in his father's demeanor. This wasn't a father speaking to a son, but a mission commander making tactical decisions based on decades of experience. He nodded in acknowledgement. Harrick selected the 2 most experienced operators from the combined teams, the former Delta leader and the DEA specialist with extensive cartel territory experience. They departed immediately in a separate vehicle, taking a direct route towards Sierra Blanca while maintaining communications blackout for operational security. The approach to the Sierra Blanca facility, an abandoned copper processing plant, was conducted with extreme caution. They established an observation position at 0547, using high-powered optics to assess the situation from maximum safe distance. What they observed was concerning. Unlike the other 2 facilities, which had shown evidence of disruption and confusion following the coordinated strikes, the Sierra Blanca location showed heightened security posture and organized response patterns. Multiple vehicles were positioned defensively, personnel maintained tactical positions, and active security measures were evident throughout the perimeter. More concerning was the black helicopter positioned on a makeshift landing pad near the main processing building. The same aircraft Harrick had observed delivering Valiv to the Hansen Ranch days earlier. Elevated security profile inconsistent with reconnaissance assessment, the Delta operator noted clinically. Indicators suggest foreknowledge of operation, or high-value presence requiring additional security, Harrick countered, focusing his spotting scope on the main building entrance. The helicopter confirms at least the possibility of command personnel on site. Further observation revealed no sign of Team 3 or their vehicle. No evidence of combat was visible from their position, suggesting either clean capture or the team had been intercepted before reaching the target. Tactical assessment. Harrick asked the operators. High-risk extraction attempt with current personnel. The Delta operator replied immediately. Security force superior in numbers and positioning, multiple interlocking fields of fire, probable enhanced surveillance active. Not advisable with 3-man element. Agreed, the DEA specialist added. Pattern suggests prepared defensive posture, not reactionary. They were expecting company. Harrick continued his observation, methodically documenting security positions, personnel movements, and potential vulnerabilities. His expression remained impassive, but internally, the tactical calculation was shifting from rescue to intelligence gathering. We maintain observation position, he decided finally. Document all movement, personnel, and communications if possible. Priority is confirming status of Team 3. Secondary objective is identifying command presence. For the next 2 hours, they maintained their surveillance position, documenting a facility clearly on high alert yet operating with professional discipline. Periodic communications with the fallback position confirmed Teams 1 and 2 remain secure, with no indication of compromise or pursuit. At 0817, movement at the main building entrance caught Harrick's attention. A group of personnel emerged, moving with tactical discipline toward the helicopter. Among them, Harrick immediately recognized Anton Valiv, moving with the same measured confidence he had displayed at the Hansen Ranch. More concerning was what followed. 3 individuals being escorted under guard, hands secured behind them, moving with the stiffness of those who had endured harsh treatment. Team 3, captured intact, but clearly subjected to interrogation. Through his high-powered scope, Harrick could see the faces of the captured operators, battered but stoic, maintaining professional composure despite their situation. They were loaded into the helicopter under armed guard, followed by Valiv and what appeared to be his personal security detail. Extraction assessment. Harrick asked, his voice betraying no emotion despite the gravity of the situation. Negative tactical advantage. The Delta operator replied after careful consideration. Hostiles have complete control of battle space, superior numbers, prepared positions. Extraction attempt would likely result in loss of all personnel, including captives. Harrick knew he was right. The operation had achieved 2/3 of its objectives. The primary communications infrastructure at Marfa and Fort Stockton had been disabled, severely degrading Valiv's network capabilities. But the cost had been the capture of Team 3, and now Valiv was extracting with the prisoners to an unknown location. He documented the helicopter's departure at 0842, tracking its heading due south toward the border. The pattern was clear. Valiv was relocating to a secure position in Mexico, beyond immediate reach, taking the captured operators as leverage or for continued interrogation. "We withdraw to fallback position," Harrick ordered, his voice calm despite the implications. "Document everything, maintain operational security during extraction." As they departed the observation position, Harrick's mind was already shifting to the next phase. The network had been degraded but not eliminated. Valiv had escaped with prisoners who possessed operational knowledge. And most critically, the game between old adversaries had escalated to a new level of personal engagement. This was no longer just about dismantling an intelligence network. It had become about retrieving captured operators and settling a decades-old rivalry once and for all. The fallback position, a remote hunting lodge 40 miles outside Alpine, became the center of operations as Harrick and his team regrouped and assessed the situation. The captured Team 3 operators represented not just a tactical loss but a security liability. Under interrogation by someone with Valiv's expertise, they would eventually yield information that could compromise everyone involved in the operation. Timeline assessment? Harrick asked the assembled operators, his voice maintaining the clinical detachment of a professional despite the personal stakes. Assuming Russian interrogation protocols, we have approximately 48 hours before critical information compromise, the former Delta operator replied. They're trained to resist, but against specialized methods. He didn't need to finish the sentence. Everyone in the room understood the realities of professional interrogation. It wasn't a question of if the operators would break, but when. "What's our play?" Robert asked, studying the map spread across the table. "The helicopter crossed into Mexican airspace. That puts them beyond our operational reach without diplomatic complications." "Diplomacy isn't an option," Harrick replied. "Official channels remain compromised. Any formal approach would be detected and countered before it began." The room fell silent as the implications settled. They were contemplating an unauthorized cross-border operation to retrieve American citizens from a hostile force operating on foreign soil. The legal, professional, and personal consequences of failure would be catastrophic. "I'm not ordering anyone to participate in what comes next," Harrick said finally, looking at each operator in turn. "What I'm contemplating goes beyond the parameters of our original mission. Anyone who chooses to withdraw now does so with complete professional respect and no repercussions." No one moved. These were professionals who understood both the risks and the ethical obligation to recover captured teammates. "Then we begin planning," Harrick said with a nod of acknowledgement. "First priority is locating their destination in Mexico." For the next 6 hours, they worked with methodical precision, utilizing every intelligence resource and contact available through their combined networks. General Sosa provided critical information on cartel properties in northern Coahuila, identifying 3 facilities with recent security enhancements and unusual personnel movements. Satellite imagery acquired through Mercer showed activity patterns consistent with a secure holding facility at a remote ranch 20 miles south of the border. By afternoon, they had established high-confidence assessment of the target location. The ranch showed classic signatures of a Soviet-style secure facility, perimeter security, overlapping surveillance sectors, and most telling, communications frequencies using encryption protocols consistent with Valiv's operation. Tactical approach assessment? Harrick asked, studying the satellite imagery. Challenging terrain, minimal cover on approach, the Delta operator replied. Security appears substantial, estimated 15-20 personnel with professional positioning. Air assets on site, likely for rapid extraction if threatened. Single point of failure operation, another operator added. One shot at insertion, execution, and extraction. No reinforcement, no official support if compromised. Harrick nodded, acknowledging the assessment without comment. He had conducted precisely such operations dozens of times during his active career, often deep in Soviet territory where discovery meant certain death or imprisonment. The tactical challenges were significant but not insurmountable with proper planning and execution. We'll need specialized equipment for the approach, he said finally, and transportation capable of cross-border insertion without detection. Through the remainder of the day, they accumulated the necessary resources, drawing on personal connections and unofficial channels. Equipment was sourced from private caches, transport arranged through contacts with experience in covert border operations. By evening, they had assembled a comprehensive operational package, weapons, communications, tactical gear, all untraceable and suited for the specific requirements of the mission. The insertion plan took shape with Harrick directing the planning, incorporating input from operators with specific expertise. They would cross the border through an unmonitored section 40 miles west of the target, utilize terrain features for concealed approach, and establish an observation position to confirm the presence of the captured operators before executing the extraction. Tactical timeline? Harrick asked after the plan was finalized. Optimal insertion window begins at 0100, allowing 6 hours of darkness for approach and execution, the Delta operator replied. Based on observed patrol patterns, primary assault window opens at approximately 0400, when security rotations create momentary vulnerability. Harrick nodded. We move at 2200, crossing the border no later than 0130. Final equipment check at 2100. As the operators dispersed to prepare for the mission, Robert approached his father privately. I should be on the insertion team. Negative, Harrick replied without hesitation. You coordinate from this side of the border. If something goes wrong, someone needs to maintain operational continuity. Ensure the compromised Border Patrol intelligence is addressed regardless of our outcome. This isn't just about operational continuity, Robert said, studying his father's face. You're containing potential damage if the mission fails. That's part of it, Harrick acknowledged. But it's also about ensuring someone carries forward if we don't return. Valiv's operation has been disrupted but not eliminated. Someone needs to finish what we started. Robert wanted to argue further, but recognized the cold logic in his father's assessment. Instead, he nodded. Just make sure you come back. I've only just started to understand who you really are. A faint smile crossed Harrick's face. Sometimes I'm not sure myself anymore. As dusk fell, Harrick walked alone outside the lodge, studying the distant mountains that marked the border. His mind wasn't on the tactical considerations of the coming mission. Those were already resolved, the plan solidified, contingencies established. Instead, he found himself reflecting on the strange convergence of past and present. Anton Valiv had been more than just an adversary during the Cold War. He had been a mirror, a counterpart who operated with the same professional precision, the same ethical compromises, the same dedication to a larger cause. Their careers had been intertwined for decades, each learning from the other, adapting to the other's methods, developing a peculiar professional respect despite serving opposing masters. Now, improbably, they were engaged in that same deadly dance in the borderlands of Texas and Mexico, two relics of a different era still employing the tradecraft that had defined their lives during the long twilight struggle between East and West. At precisely 2100, Harrick returned to the lodge for final equipment check and mission briefing. The four operators selected for the insertion team were making final preparations, checking weapons, communications equipment, medical supplies. Each item was inspected with methodical precision, each operator focused entirely on their specific responsibilities. Communications protocol review, Harrick directed, gathering the team around the tactical maps. Strict emissions control during insertion and approach. Scheduled check-ins at 30-minute intervals during extraction, using pre-established codes. If communication is lost for more than 60 minutes, remaining team executes contingency extraction without delay. They reviewed the entire operation once more: insertion vectors, approach routes, assault plan, and extraction procedures. Each phase was dissected in detail, contingencies established for potential complications. By 2200, everyone knew their roles with absolute clarity. The departure was conducted with minimal ceremony. Robert would coordinate from the lodge, maintaining secure communications and preparing contingency support if needed. The insertion team departed in two non-standard vehicles, following separate routes to the border crossing point to minimize detection risk. Harrick rode in silence during the approach, his mind settling into the familiar operational clarity he had maintained during countless missions behind the Iron Curtain. The years seemed to fall away, muscle memory and instinct reasserting themselves as if they had never been dormant. The border crossing was executed at 0127, utilizing a remote section where security sensors had been identified and manually disabled days earlier by cartel-affiliated operatives controlled by General Sosa. They abandoned the vehicles at predetermined locations on the American side, proceeding on foot with full tactical gear, maintaining communications discipline through the crossing. The approach to the target took 3 hours, slow, methodical movement across terrain selected specifically to minimize detection risk. They encountered no patrols, no sensors, suggesting Valiv's security remained focused on conventional threats rather than a precisely planned covert insertion. By 0430, they had established an observation position overlooking the ranch complex. Through thermal imaging and high-powered optics, they confirmed security positions, patrol patterns, and most critically, the presence of 3 heat signatures in a secured outbuilding consistent with restrained prisoners. Target confirmation positive, the Delta operator whispered. Security disposition as anticipated. Assault window opens in approximately 12 minutes when patrol rotation creates momentary gap in coverage. Harrick nodded, making final adjustments to his equipment. The plan called for a two-pronged approach. The main team would create a diversion at the southern perimeter, drawing security response while Harrick and the Delta operator executed the actual extraction from the northern approach. Timing would be critical, with a tactical window of less than 5 minutes from initiation to consolidation at the extraction point. At precisely 0442, the operation began. The diversion team executed perfectly, creating a security alert that drew response exactly as anticipated. Harrick and his partner moved immediately, exploiting the reaction to penetrate the northern perimeter without detection. They reached the detention building at 0447, encountering 2 guards who were neutralized with silent efficiency. Inside, they found the 3 captured operators, battered, obviously subjected to harsh interrogation, but alive and conscious. Extraction team, Harrick said simply, using a specialized tool to cut through their restraints. Can you move under your own power? Affirmative, the senior operator replied, his voice hoarse but determined. Tactical situation? Diversion active south side, extraction route north to Rally Point Alpha. 12-minute window before security re-establishes perimeter control. With professional discipline, the freed operators moved despite their injuries, following the pre-planned extraction route with Harrick leading and the Delta operator providing rear security. They reached the northern perimeter at 0453, just as the diversion team was disengaging from the southern approach according to the operation timeline. The extraction proceeded with precision timing, all elements converging on Rally Point Alpha at 0458. A drainage culvert offering concealment while they assessed pursuit patterns and confirmed the extraction route remained viable. By 0510, they were moving across the border terrain, maintaining maximum stealth despite the deteriorating physical condition of the rescued operators. What they didn't anticipate was the reaction speed of Valiv's security forces. The pursuit was organized more quickly than expected, utilizing both ground teams and the helicopter observed during previous surveillance. By 0530, they could hear the aircraft conducting search patterns behind their position, using thermal imaging to scan the terrain systematically. Accelerate to contingency extraction point Delta, Harrick ordered, recognizing the tactical situation was deteriorating. Maintain maximum terrain masking. Priority is getting across the border before they establish blocking positions. The pace increased despite the physical limitations of the rescued operators. They pushed through pain and exhaustion, maintaining disciplined movement protocols while exploiting every terrain feature that could defeat aerial thermal detection. By 0600, they were within 2 miles of the border crossing point, but the helicopter was narrowing its search pattern, closing the distance between them. The sun was rising, diminishing the effectiveness of their nighttime infiltration gear and increasing detection risk. We need to split the element, Harrick decided. Main group continues to extraction point. I'll create a diversion to draw aerial assets away from your position. The Delta operator started to protest, but Harrick cut him off with a gesture. No debate. Get our people home. That's the mission. Without waiting for further discussion, Harrick separated from the main group, moving eastward across exposed terrain, deliberately creating a heat signature that would be detected by the helicopter's thermal imaging. The tactic worked immediately, the aircraft adjusting course to investigate the new contact. Harrick maintained a steady pace, drawing the pursuit further from the main group's extraction route. He utilized every bit of cover available, but purposely remained detectable enough to hold the helicopter's attention. Behind him, he could hear the main group moving away toward the border, their window of opportunity widening with every minute he kept the aerial assets focused on his position. The game had come full circle. Once again, he was operating alone behind enemy lines, using skills honed over decades to survive against professional opposition. The years fell away completely, muscle memory taking over, instinct guiding his movements across terrain he had analyzed and memorized during planning. When the helicopter finally closed to visual identification range, Harrick was prepared. He had positioned himself in a ravine offering limited cover but multiple escape routes. The aircraft circled once, confirming his position, then moved to deploy a ground team to investigate. As the helicopter descended to deploy its ground team, Harrick executed his final contingency. Using terrain features for concealment, he circled back toward a secondary extraction route he had memorized during planning, a challenging path through rugged terrain that would be difficult for pursuit teams to follow without specialized training. What he hadn't anticipated was finding Anton Valiv himself among the ground team, personally directing the pursuit. Their eyes met briefly across the distance, a moment of recognition between old adversaries. Valiv's expression showed no surprise, only the cold calculation of a professional assessing the tactical situation. No words were exchanged. None were necessary. Both men understood the stakes and the inevitable conclusion of their decade-long contest. With deliberate precision, Harrick withdrew into the rugged terrain, leading the pursuit further from the main group's extraction route. For the next 4 hours, he employed every evasion technique in his considerable arsenal, drawing the pursuit team deeper into increasingly difficult terrain while maintaining just enough distance to prevent effective engagement. It was a masterclass in tactical withdrawal, not running, but controlling the pursuit, dictating its pace and direction to serve his ultimate objective. By mid-morning, he had confirmation through his secure communications channel. The main group had successfully crossed the border with all rescued personnel intact. Mission accomplished. Only then did Harrick adjust his approach, shifting from evasion to extraction, utilizing a pre-planned route to an emergency pickup point where General Sosa's people waited with transportation. The pursuit gradually faded as he crossed back into American territory, Valiv apparently recognizing the changing tactical reality and withdrawing his forces rather than risking an international incident. By afternoon, Harrick had rejoined the team at the hunting lodge, the rescued operators already receiving medical attention from the same team that had treated Robert's unit. "Never thought I'd see extraction protocols that smooth outside official channels," one of the rescued operators commented, his voice strained but determined. "Soviet-era tradecraft, executed perfectly. Cold War techniques still have their applications," Harrick replied, checking the man's bandaged wounds with professional concern. "Rest now. You've earned it." Later, as the team prepared to disperse to various safe locations for recovery, Robert approached his father. Border patrols reporting complete disruption of cartel communications across the region. "Whatever they were building, you broke it." "Temporarily," Harrick corrected. "Valiv will rebuild, adapt, establish new protocols." "That's what he does. But you'll be watching." A faint smile crossed Harrick's face. "Some games never really end." In the days that followed, official reports documented a series of technical failures in cartel communications infrastructure, attributed to equipment deficiencies and interdiction of key personnel by Mexican authorities. No mention was made of sophisticated intelligence operations or Soviet-trained specialists. Some truths remained in the shadows, visible only to those with the experience to recognize them. Harrick returned to his ranch outside Terlingua, restoring its security measures and resuming the quiet routine that had defined his retirement. But beneath that routine, watchfulness remained, sensors monitored, communications were checked, security protocols maintained. 3 weeks later, a package arrived through channels so circuitous even Harrick was impressed by their complexity. Inside was a single item, the Soviet-made lighter he had taken from Valiv in Berlin decades ago, somehow recovered from Harrick's home during his absence. Accompanying it was a note, handwritten in the distinctive Cyrillic script he recognized immediately. "Until next time, old friend." The game continues. The cartel's defeat was undeniable. Though some questioned the extent of Harrick's actions, most celebrated the powerful message sent. America does not bow to intimidation. Harrick, humble yet firm, quietly stepped back from the limelight, continuing duties without fanfare, steadfast in moral clarity. His story stands as a testament to an enduring American truth, that genuine strength lies not in aggression but in preparedness, resolve, and the unwavering commitment to justice and liberty for all. What do you think about this incredible stand? Do you believe strength alone guarantees justice, or does real power lie in partnership, strategy, and bravery? Share your perspective in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe for more gripping real-life stories of courage in the face of overwhelming odds.